Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I just finished watching Orville New Horizons Domino, the newest episode of the new season. And I gotta say, I was very surprised with it. And when this new season first started, I didn't think any episode in the show could ever top Electric Sheep as one of my favorites. But this episode may very well do it. I haven't decided yet, but if nothing else, it's a close second to Electric Sheep. And that's a very impressive thing and very high praise coming from me because Electric Sheep is just some of the most phenomenal sci-fi ever seen. And this episode is definitely a close second to it in so many different ways that just blew me away. And a lot of that came from the tension of this episode. It's a penultimate episode, so a lot of things are getting closer to the end, things are coming to a head. There's got to be tension to really sell the stakes of a penultimate and eventually a finale. And this episode 100% delivers on that and kept me on the edge of my seat for the entirety of the episode, which is a very impressive thing for it to do. And I was 100% satisfied with this episode by the end of it. But before I get any further, there will be minor spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. And of course, the emotional heart of this newest episode is the relationship of Charlie and Isaac finally coming to a head, and really Charlie's character arc throughout this season. And she has easily become one of my favorite parts of this new season, and of the show as a whole. Her character arc has just been phenomenally done, from Electric Sheep, where she just hates Isaac so implicitly for what he is, to eventually resurrecting him despite her better judgment, and that evolution to where she came to trust him and rely on him and consider him a friend. Even in this episode, she says the other Kalons could learn a lot from Isaac, and that just shows so much growth from her character. And then to eventually give up her own life to save the Kalons as a race. That's something that she would never have been capable of just a few episodes ago, let alone in Electric Sheep. It was just so phenomenally done that her character arc is one of the best things to happen in sci-fi these days, because a lot of Hollywood isn't capable of a character arc like this, and a lot of actors aren't capable of displaying it from beginning to end how well this episode did it, and I just can't praise it enough. The major conflict of this episode was the ethical dilemma of it, and I really love ethical dilemmas. It's part of why this episode gets such a high estimation, in my opinion, is how a lot of the conflicting ideas throughout this episode, some of them have good merit. I mean, some people may not even consider the Kalons alive. They consider them as a threat. How can we all survive? And the Admiral's perspective, who eventually betrays the Union, which was a surprising thing for me. I get where he's coming from, and Gordon and Charlie were very much on his side at the beginning of the episode. It's an ethical dilemma, and I love explorations of that. At first, it doesn't go too much into depth into the ethics, it just mentions it, and by the end, it comes to head in a climactic conclusion that I feel very much explored the ethics of it in a very interesting way, because Charlie was the only one who could actually show both sides of the argument because of her evolution, and it was just very well done, and I love ethical dilemmas like this, and this episode very much delivered on that. And of course, I have to mention the action of this episode. It is definitely some of the best of this season, or the series as a whole, really. It was a lot of great stuff. I mean, some classic homages to the trench run from Star Wars, some great stuff like that, but just the action in general, the dog fighting, the fighting through the corridors, it was all phenomenally done. But I do have a bit of an issue with the action when it comes to the girl fight that Hollywood has to do. Kelly and Talea had to fight each other. Guys can't hit girls anymore, so who else was going to do it besides Kelly? And so, it was a little bit annoying that they decided to go with that trope, but the fight was good enough choreographed wise, and it moved on to other good scenes right after that, so I was ultimately able to forgive it, but it was quite annoying at first. And when it came to the MacGuffin of the episode, this device that can wipe out the Kalons, I was initially very unhappy with its inclusion. I thought it just resolved everything way too quickly. I thought that the beginning part should have been a simulation, but the stuff that it was able to set up for the end of this episode made it more than worth it. I 100% forgive it and understand why they were going with this weapon of mass destruction. They definitely did a good job with it in the end, and I was very satisfied with how it played out in the end. So no issues with that. But above all else, I loved the surprising nature of the episode where it decided not to make the Kalons the villains of the end of the season like it had been setting up to. And at first I was very disconcerted with that. It's like, hey, the Kalons, they should be the villains. They've been setting this up for 2-3 seasons now. Why aren't they the end? But I think the thing that I have to remember is that the Union, the Orville, they're not soldiers. They're not a military first. They're explorers, and peace is their ultimate goal in all scenarios. So the best way to resolve a conflict with an enemy like the Kalon is through peace. That whole deterrent situation that they tried to implement at the beginning of the episode was never going to work. There was never going to be a permanent solution. The Kalon would eventually found a way to make it obsolete, get around the weapon destroy or something like that. There was never going to be a permanent solution, and they were never going to trust the Union because of it. They still saw them as the builders because using the weapon made them a slave race, at least in their own minds. So that was never going to work permanently. So the Admiral's portrayal actually led towards peace in a way that nothing else could have. And Charlie's hatred leading to her sacrifice and her forgiveness of the Kalons enough to give her own life to save them and prevent their genocide is exactly what needed to happen for the Kalons to realize that the Union weren't the same as the builders that constructed them, that they were worth preserving. And that was just a great way to wrap up the conflict with the Kalons in a way that 100% surprised me, but feels so natural and so needed for all these characters involved that I loved it. I loved how it turned out in the end. Charlie was the only one who could really make the Kalon see because of how much she hated them. And it was just so beautifully done. And I have to again mention Charlie's character arc. It was so essential to resolving the things with Kalon. It's just so essential to a lot of the characters involved in the show. She was just so phenomenal and so impactful on the show that her death meant something. I prefer that she wouldn't have had any last words. Her last words were a little cheesy, but besides that, her final moments were just so very well done. And then, of course, their bookend by the memorial at the end of the episode with Isaac, his speech about her. And even though he's an emotionless creature, he expressed emotions in a way that was so profound that it just made sense. Their hatred had turned into friendship, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Overall, I love this episode. It may be undone in the next episode. I don't know where they're going to go with it now that the Kalon conflict has been resolved. I thought this might have been the last episode the way that it was running, but there's definitely an episode left. So I don't know how they're going to do it. Maybe what they were going to do is going to undo all the greatness of this episode. That's part of why I'm holding out saying that it's the best episode of the Orville, really, at least of this season, because it might be undone retroactively. So I'm going to hold out on that. But it's a lot of interesting places that they could go now. So I very much look forward to next week, and I'm very much excited to see it. This episode deserves an 8 out of 10 very easily. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The character work was just phenomenal in the midst of some of the best action. It balanced action and character work so well that I thoroughly loved it. And it's just one of the greatest episodes of sci-fi I've seen in a very, very long time. And I look forward to seeing where these characters go in the future. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.